already joined us. We'll go around right quick to introductions and starting off with Tom D. How are you? Okay.
I'm good. There you are. Unmute.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Okay, next, please. Go ahead.
Mike Somerville is here.
Thank you, Mike.
Benjamin Kelly.
Thanks, Benjamin.
Matt
Richard.
Waters here.
Matt, good to see you.
Yep.
Richard Cuno.
Richard, look nice and comfortable.
Kip Tillotson.
Good.
Art Beal.
Art.
Elaine Summon.
Thank you, Lane.
Tyler Nelson with the Lewis Soil District.
Okay. Next. Who's on the phone with us?
Sorry, Chairman Wright, Chantal Chapel Knowlton with the Attorney General's office.
Okay, thank Chantal. Who else is on the phone with us?
Hobel Heinrich.
Terry. Okay,
Farmer Bragg, Custer SWCD.
thank you.
Alan Smith, Fayette Soil Buffer Conservation District.
Welcome, Alan.
What's that?
Okay. You can't be working a tractor, Alan, can you? Ken.
When you're muted.
Okay.
Yes, we really like these frozen mornings when the ground is frozen where we have the opportunity to spread compost. It's a conservation practice, you know.
Yes, it is. A very good one. Okay. So I see Wendy has joined us. Have we heard from Eric yet?
No. Excellent.
Okay. Well, I guess we also do a roll call. Thank you for all that have introduced yourself. We can see little pictures of you up here, so thank you for that. The next thing is, I guess we'll have roll call of the commissioners.
Chairman Norman Wright.
Here.
Commissioner Kathy Romer.
Here.
Commissioner Jerry Trebish.
Here.
Commissioner Eric Olson. Commissioner Wendy Pratt.
Here.
All right. Well, with that, we've got a quorum, and looking at the agenda and knowing how the time is, I believe we're going to skip over part of the reports at this present time and the agenda review and move down to discussion with the Idaho Association and Soil Conservation Districts Board. So if you guys, everybody wants to skip down to item number 4. It's my understanding that Matt and them have a meeting in about an hour. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So if you want to pull up that slide so we can go from there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry Mearson with the commission. So given that we have, if not the full board of ISCD, pretty close to it, your board would like to kick it off with just a sort of fast discussion of where we are right now. As you know, our discussion today is centered on what is the path forward. So with that, Crystal is pulling up my memo so that folks can see it on the screen. Wanted to briefly talk about the Commission's efforts. So over the course of the last year, we've been focused on changes that districts said that they wanted to see the Commission make. So we went out, we surveyed, and we got a list of things that we needed to focus on. So the comments included that the districts we spoke with wanted more district perspectives in decision-making. Your board addressed this by discussing reactivating the non-voting advisory board and also by the commissioners beginning to reach out directly to individual supervisors as well as attend meetings virtually. That's been going on now since, I think, end of November. The second thing that districts mentioned was that they really wanted to see trust rebuilt between our board and Boise and district boards. So we've been working through that, both by the commissioners doing direct outreach, and our staff are now, or should be, attending every district board meeting virtually, one per month usually. The third thing we heard was that our field staff should be working closely with districts at that level. So again, they are attending monthly district meetings, and our online resources for reporting on technical assistance delivered, et cetera, have been significantly beefed up on the website. We also heard that we should be building stronger relationships with IASCD and our other partners. So we went in and we looked at NRCS rules, responsibilities, hours, districts, and nonprofits. And we updated the roles and responsibilities information on our website so that expectations could be clarified and responsibilities as well. The other thing that we identified was that we should work closely to determine legislative education and outreach strategies and outcome. Now that's something we have done with IASCD in past, and this meeting is part of reestablishing our shared goals and connections with IASCD. We also decided that we should increase our legislative and governor's office interactions. So we, in preparation for the session, your board, 2 members would meet with committee chairs, and we talked about the things that would be coming up this session, answered questions, and we also are making more frequent updates to and from the governor's office. The other concern that we heard was that we should communicate with districts more effectively. So we continue our monthly updates that we distribute to our field staff and our division meetings. We have shortened the length of the presentations. We try to avoid lengthy memos wherever we can and to be more concise, to be able to present things in one page wherever possible. The reports, districts were concerned about the number of reports that they're required to submit to us annually under statute and rule. There is some discretion in that, so Delwyn is working with the field staff and some regional reps to ask districts what works for them. We're trying to determine what is absolutely necessary and what is superfluous. So we'll have some recommendations after Delwyn's outreach period ends. We've heard some great suggestions. For example, rather than have an annual report or an annual plan and an annual report, combining those so that they can be done together, that makes a lot of sense. We have also heard, reports that have no meaning or utility should be eliminated. One district also suggested that we purchase a Zoom license so that our field staff could attend more meetings remotely, and we've done that. On technical assistance, there were some comments that more flexibility was desired. And so we looked and we determined that that had actually been done in 2015 and 16. And district response to those changes we made was significantly reported with our performance measures report for 2016 and 17, I think, when our approval rating, satisfaction rating went to 91% of district boards that were satisfied. We were also told that there's a perception that we're kind of making mandatory directives to districts. So we are adjusting and have adjusted our tone of communications. In the way we communicate about the fiduciary and statutory obligation of districts. We also were greatly assisted by a supervisor in Ada, Joan Clunan, who said that we need to go through that district reference manual, which does not have the force of law, and remove the shalls and the musts and redo that. So Delwyn's got some folks who have volunteered to be part of that, going through that document. In June, you'll see the result of that. And we're kind of excited about that. So are there any questions about the things that we have identified, that we can change at this point? Any questions, Mr. Chair?
None for me. Anybody else have any questions?
Mr. Chair, we'll add that I think I've forgotten it on my list, but one of the frequent things that we heard was that our newsletter didn't represent districts as well as it represented us. And so we heard that, and we have begun a multi-year process of featuring districts in every issue. I think it goes out 2 years, something like that. We are now in our 4th article. We've so far featured a number of districts, Ada and et cetera. So if we have not featured a district yet, stay tuned because we're coming. Okay, there were some things that districts wanted to see changed that we could not do without additional resources or legislation. So, for example, some tasks like new supervisor and staff orientation, particularly in person, more district outreach, education and training. Those are things that the TRS2 was responsible for. And of course, as you know, that position is recommended for removal. And so that's on our really want to do, but have to put off for a little while. We also heard that additional technical assistance hours for district support is greatly desired. And so Delwyn he went yesterday to the Magic Valley to meet with a district down there. He is determining how we can adjust the workload and make sure that particularly divisions 4 and 6 see an increased availability of commission field staff to help them with projects. So that is coming, and if you are in those regions, it would be particularly helpful if you got a hold of Delwyn and talk to him about your needs. Now, we are not slated to get any new district support field staff, but we're looking at how we can kind of shift things around using our existing and possibly one other that may come dedicated to CREP. We're not sure yet, but we have heard some rumblings about that. The additional funding for projects, we had proposed that we utilize $500,000 annually of RCRDP loan funds for Wapak cost share as a pilot project to determine if we could get kind of prime the pump on our loan program and also get more technical conservation on the ground in the field. We were advised is too strong of a word. it was suggested that we spend this next year doing outreach to determine if indeed all district boards are interested in that. And so as part of Dylan's outreach that he's going to talk about here pretty quick, he'll kind of detail what he's hearing. A big, I think, a unified desire among district boards is that trustee and benefits funding needs to be overhauled. There are obviously with 50 different districts, there are all kinds of different ideas about how that should happen. And so in a minute, we're going to talk about how we're going to identify the leading contender for remaking the trustee and benefits fund so that it is more equitable. We are working very hard to make sure that we get not the recommendations of individual supervisors, but the formal official recommendation of boards that have had a chance to discuss what is in their best interest and how they would like to see it changed. I think there are two things that are happening here. One is the method of distribution, and the other is the amount of distribution. And the thing that I really want to stress is that our discussions with districts are really focusing on the method at this point. We all know that there could be more funding, and perhaps there could be a way of shuffling the internal components, but we all agree that there should be more. This is about the method. And so that's where those conversations are going. We are also, let me see if I lost my place here. We met with Representative Gibbs and Senator Harris in the governor's office and others, and we presented a path forward. We'll get to that again, I'll refer to in a couple of minutes. The district capacity issue was brought up a number of times, the need for more technical assistance. So again, we're evaluating that workload in Division 4 and 6 particularly to figure out how can we get more assistance to districts. We have been talking to the Idaho groundwater users about increasing CREP coverage and funding. It's too early to say whether or not that will be successful. We're hopeful that a dedicated person to CREP would increase the amount of field staff time that could be spent in 4 and 6. So that's kind of out there. I think Benjamin's had a conversation with Lynn Tominaga on that as well. And finally, one of the things that reduced the loan program bureaucracy. In the loan program, we last month, your board appointed Commissioners Pratt and Olson to work with the loan officer and come up with some recommended changes to the loan program and the process at our March meeting. So while we're spinning the district support plate, we're also spinning the loan program plate, and we'll talk about that more in March. Any questions about the legislation that's necessary? I guess I would say this is kind of a punch list for things we're going to be focusing on between now and June. June is when we have to submit new ideas for legislation to the governor. And so we front loaded a lot of work, a lot of staff time to really determine what it is that districts want and need and how the legislation can be tailored to address that. Now, I guess any questions on the legislation component? Okay, moving along then to our legislative meetings with Representative Gibbs, Senator Harris, and others. I did discuss briefly that our commissioners engaged in December with the head of Senate Ag and House Ag and JFAC to just make them aware of things that were going to happen And Commissioner or Chairman Wright, you had a discussion with Chairman Burtonshaw. Did you want to talk about that here?
Yes, going back to the agenda, Terry set up a meeting with Senator Burtonshaw and Senator Bayer, who are chair and vice chair of the Senate Ag Resource Committee. And we were just discussing with them the things that were happening in the commission, upcoming information as far as the amendment of the bills that we were presenting to clear up some language. And so there was a really good discussion. And then partway through the meeting, Senator Burtonshaw made comment and asked us how the Franklin County issue was coming. We said soon we were hopefully moving on. And he made comment that Senator Harris had talked to him a couple, 3 days earlier, and that he was still upset. And we said, well, that's understandable, probably. And so he made the comment about maybe we should talk to him, which was a good idea. And so Senator Burtonshaw, to his credit, he set up a meeting the following week with himself, and Senator Bayer was also there, but also Senator Harris and Representative Gibbs were there also. And Eric Olson and myself and Terry and Delvin were on that conversation. And we had a really good conversation with them. It changed a lot from what I thought it was going to be about. And it got down to, they really think that the way the money is distributed to the districts needs to be clarified and easier. That's really a lot of what it got down to. And they also had some questions as to how the money's distributed, how maybe one district's getting more money than another district, how it would affect. They were a little bit confused on the 2-to-1 match and how it was set up. And so we said, well, we'd be more than happy to get in more in those detailed information and agreed to have another meeting. But we're really turned around, and thank you, Mr. Olson, who I see has joined us. He made a comment that all of a sudden kind of seemed to get some traction. And that was, in the meantime, maybe we could talk about some money. And, you know, really, if you guys would do the 2-to-1 match, it would really help all districts. And so they said, well, let's talk about it. And so we started talking about it. They want to know how much money and what it would do and all that. And we did not have those figures at that time. And we offered to get back with them, send them some information, and to schedule another meeting. And so that's kind of where we left that. Eric, do you want to add something to that?
No, I think you covered it, Norman. Sorry, I had 9 o'clock my time as the meeting started, so I apologize for coming in late. I thought when I made the comment, I thought, you know, these guys, Senator Burtonshaw was on, and Gibbs and Harris, they all were wanting to try to do something this year, and it just seemed to me like that we were rushing through, and usually when you rush through with government, nothing comes out the way anybody wants. So I thought if we could buy some time for the year and push for the full 2-to-1 match in order to carry these districts through for this year, and we can go and do our surveys to get exactly what everybody's talking about in line and everybody on board, and have legislation for next session to get through so we can get something changed for the future. It just, you know, for me, it made sense. But I hope that we'll, I haven't heard much. I've been kind of out of the loop for a little bit as far as what's going on and where, but I want to, I commend our chairman and Terry and both. I really commend Senator Burtonshaw for setting up the meeting, because I think it really broke through the ice, and hopefully we can get somewhere and get something done and get some change that's implemented for all the districts and help with the funding situation.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Mr. Chair, we have two comments in the chat, and three actually, and we're going to try to stay on top of those. If there are questions people want to submit that way, we'll start watching those closer. Alan Schmid said he really appreciates Joan Clennan's suggestions. Combined reporting requirements is a winner. And Elaine Sonnen, I'm not sure if that was the comment that she agreed.
She agrees.
She agreed to that. Then Alan wanted to know if anyone has suggestions as to how more effectively integrate the districts in the EQIP and NRCS programs. It's like dancing via Zoom, no touching. So we will have Curtis on here after 10 o'clock. And so, Alan, I think that's a really good question that you could ask Curtis when he gets on.
Okay, so from this meeting, it morphed into another meeting. So the following week, we had another meeting with Senator Burtonshaw, Senator Baer, Senator Harris, Representative Gibbs, also Representative Andrus was on there, and Nate from the governor's office was on there. And so we had a really good discussion. We'd already sent them information concerning what monies it would take to make the 2-to-1 match. We talked, also showed them, as we'll show you later, how the 2-to-1 match worked. And it was more of an informative meeting. And they again talked more about the 2-to-1 match. They seem to want us to say immediately how to change it. And we did not want to do that at all. We said that was up to the districts, not us. And so we left that alone. We did agree to a timeline to try to find that information out for them, let them know. And Terry can show that to you later. So again, it was a really good meeting. It went forward. A lot of positive things came out of it. And that was really good. So we're hoping it morphs out to assist the districts in additional funds. That's the bottom line. So with that, unless someone has questions or Eric, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you did fine, Norman, covering it.
Okay. The only thing that we're really sad about right now, as maybe most of you know, Senator Burtonshaw is in the hospital with COVID. And that concerns everybody a little bit, because he was really, really a spark plug here and a mediator and a motivator. And we really missed him. I'm wishing well.
Mr. Chair, could I move then to the PowerPoint that we showed the legislators? I'll just blaze through that really quickly. Okay, Crystal, if you would put that up. So our agenda for that, Representative Gibbs was a real driver. He wanted to know how we got where we are. He wanted to know, where does commission money go? That goes to personnel and operating. Both Gibbs, Representative Gibbs and Senator Harris really didn't quite get the concept of the distribution of match funding, how much one district gets donated by local sources, how that affects the other districts. And so we dealt with that. They also wanted to know, if we moved ahead with the full 2-to-1 match this year, how much would that cost? And then how do the majority of districts want to restructure match funding? Again, as Chairman Wright said, we did not give our opinions. What we did was give a timeline and a to-do list that will help us determine that, working with district boards between now and middle of April, actually. So let's move to slide number 3.
This is technically 3. Do you mean this
Okay.
one?
Yeah, I have some, out of order things. So we talked a little bit about the revenues that come in, the costs that go out. And basically, we're looking in personnel and operating. This has to do with where does the full commission money go? So the full commission money goes to personnel and operating and trustee and benefits. And so that is 1.3 million in fiscal year 20 went to personnel. I can hardly see it, but I think it's 317 went to operating, and trustee and benefits was 1.24 roughly.
Kit has a question.
Yes,
Kit asks, what did you tell them the full 2-to-1 match number would be?
we'll get there. Yeah, good question, Kit. Let's go down to the next slide, if you would. So we talked about our personnel, and so we have, did you skip a slide?
These are the order you gave them to me in.
So we have about 15,938 field staff hours goes to district support. CREP takes up 3,620. Then we have groundwater quality, TMDL 3,500, special services. And then as state employees, our employees get leave. And so that has to be factored in for a total of 26,622 field staff hours. So let's, if we could move to the next slide.
I have a request to resize the screen. So
that's great. Thank you.
just a moment.
Go
Is that
ahead,
better?
Yeah, okay. Tom says yes.
Okay. I'm not sure who asked because it's BSWC.
Okay, and we have, all of this is in the agenda packet as well. And so if you go and download the agenda packet, you'll have these numbers as well. So let's move down to the next slide if you would.
Resize just a little bit.
So the operating, this is just a quick and dirty chart that shows we have 2 engineers, we have 11 water quality resource conservationists. Their total hours are 26,622, including leave. And we looked at our costs for 2020, and there are costs that we incur to put people out in the field. We have to have desks, we have to have computers, we have to have an office in Boise, we have to have reporting. All of those things create a loaded rate. If you could kind of scroll down. So they are salary and benefits. They include operating and agency administration. They include what we call SWICAP charges, the controller's office, the attorney general, the treasurer's office, the division of financial management, the Department of Human Resources, et cetera, cybersecurity, telephone, IT, data communications, rent, fleet and fuels, and equipment. So the loaded numbers of what it costs us to put a field staff person include all those other rates. So the total cost to the general fund personnel and operating funds is just over $1 million. Let's go ahead to the next. Okay, so if you look at the trustee and benefits to districts in fiscal year 2020, we have the base, the operating, the capacity building, regional capacity building, and local match. One of the changes we'll be making this year is that capacity building, both regional and individual, will be put in the local match pot so that we will no longer make those awards to districts. It'll just go into the local match pending some sort of change by the legislature. So a total of 1.2 million. And next. So the total general fund appropriation in 2020 was trustee and benefits 1.2, and we take nothing out of trustee and benefits. We just distribute that directly to districts. But the personnel and operating hours and costs that are directly attributed to providing help to put conservation on the ground. That's a little over $1 million. So the total general fund to districts in 2020 was $2.3 million. That left us with 400,000 roughly to do other programs, TMDL, PrEP, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't include our CRDP with these numbers. That's a totally separate dedicated fund. So we are purely talking about district support and those programs and services that we provide to further conservation. Let's go ahead and do one more slide. So Delwyn, if you would explain the concept of how district matching funds affect the rest.
All right. Really simple, of course. The amount of match funds we have is the total of the trustee and benefits appropriation, and subtract from that the $8,500 per district that goes out as base allocation, subtract the $100,000 that goes out at a rate of $2,000 per district as an operations allocation, and that leaves it leaves whatever is left in the trustee and benefits appropriation as available money to be distributed as match, providing state funds to match the local support received by each district. And you can see in this little example here, just for the sake of this example, let's assume that there are only 4 districts in the state. The total amount of local support received by each of those 4 districts, the sum total is $10,000, and you can see there one district collected $1,000, one $2,000, one $3,000, and one $4,000 of local support. Looking at the amount of local support that each individual district received as a percentage of the total amount of local support, District 1 received 10%, District 2, 20, 3, 30, and 4, 40%. So look down at the 2 pies. The pie on the left is the pie representing all the local support the districts received during the previous year. The pie on the right is the available match funds. And again, for the purposes of this example, let's assume there's a total of $100,000 of match funds available. What this shows is that District 1 that received a total of 10% of the total statewide local support is therefore eligible for 10% of the available match funds pie. So that's how we distribute proportionately the state funds that are available for match. If your district accounted for 10% of the total local support received in the previous fiscal year, your district is entitled to 10% of the available match funds. The only caveat to that is, of course, in statute, it limits the amount of match that any one district can receive in any one year to $50,000. So if a district, once they hit that $50,000 cap, any additional funds that would have been accruing to them proportionately go back into that available match funds pie there on the right and are distributed proportionately among the remaining districts. And so the question was asked in our meeting with the legislators, what effect does it make on everybody's match allocation if one district receives more than receives an increased amount of local support and therefore an increased amount of match? And this shows what I did here was this is the same data as the previous slide, where District 1 received $1,000 of local support, District 2, $2,000, but here District 3, instead of receiving $3,000, it's now received $5,000, and District 4 is still holding at the $4,000. So the total amount of local support received by all 4 districts was $12,000 instead of $10,000. And if you look at the percentage, you can see that the $1,000 received by District 1 represents now only 8% of the total, whereas previously, before District 3 got a bump in its local support from $3,000 to $5,000, District 1 was accounting for 10% of the local support. And likewise, you can see Division 2, Division 4, their percentage, even though their absolute number of dollars received in local support didn't change, their percentage of the total statewide local support went down somewhat. So,
Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Benjamin. And I appreciate the background information, you know, and I like that we're, you know, you explain that again to those legislators, which is great, because we know 2-to-1 match is very confusing. It's the only thing more confusing is probably the you know, how counties receive money, kick it up to the state, get it back from the state, all those kind of things. I think just my suggestion is, I mean, we're getting pretty far into this meeting here, and we're going through the you know, the presentation that was already given in one of the committees. And so, you know, I guess I definitely, some of those suggestions are great, and let's start talking about them. As far as, you know, going through 2-to-1 match and stuff, I appreciate you guys sharing that with them. But, you know, I think our board would probably have a little bit better understanding than legislators. And so if we can kind of get to, you know, having a discussion, and once again, we want to hear everybody's ideas. I just think we're far enough along that we might start having a good conversation.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Benjamin. That's a great idea. Let me just address, Kit had asked what the non-district support portion was. Bill responded. It's 400,000 of that. And let's go down to the next slide where I think the next slide should deal with what the full 2-to-1 match would be. Okay, so we will quickly go through this. The additional amount to increase, we looked at scenarios. Scenario 1 was the governor's recommendation. Scenario 2 was the one we talked with Harris and Senator Representative Gibbs, increased appropriation to fund full 2-to-1 match. That came out to $220,000 roughly, additional appropriation and trustee benefits for a 1-year period. So districts can kind of scan this list as we roll quickly through the next slide and see about what that would get them. Okay, so the overall increase would be 1.5 million. And again, you can look at this chart in the agenda packet, but let me go on to the next slide really quickly. So here's the timeline. We charted the course working backwards from next legislative session. So we have some milestones. We're doing outreach to all 50 district boards. I think Delwyn a couple of weeks ago had met with 31 districts. I think they're significantly more now. He may want to give it just a real fast update at the end of the timeline. So milestone 2 is that in April, our commissioners will hear what we found out. We'll invite districts to be part of that conversation, and then we'll let things settle and kind of perk for until the May meeting. The May meeting is when our commissioners will decide to direct staff what we should be talking to the legislator, or I'm sorry, the governor's office about as a concept in June. So we're going to go back and forth with district boards and do that. Then roughly from May through end of July is when we'll be drafting potential changes to the legislature. The legislation. We have to submit it in late July, early August, and then becomes a time when we have to go out and re-meet with all of you in district meetings, division meetings, vet the changes to the legislation, submit it, and then it would be presented in January at the next session. Whether or not rules would have to be re-looked at depends on what those changes are. So hopefully, if there are no rules changes, it ends in March of 22 with sine die. But if rulemaking is necessary, then we'll have another year of going through that process. And do you want to add anything about your outreach directly to districts so far?
All I'd say is that Bill Lillibridge, Loretta Strickland, myself, and George Hitz have divided up each of the divisions and all of the districts, and we're visiting each district this month, asking for changes they would like to see, if any, in the distribution of trustee and benefits funds to districts. Next month, we're going to go back to those districts and present all the ideas we've collected this month and ask them to select the option or the scenario or the changes that they prefer, and that will inform what we suggest to the governor's office as a legislative or rule changes that we will then hope to get some action on in the next session of the legislature.
So, Mr. Chairman, if there are no questions on any of this, I think staff parts is done, and we'll hand this item over to you to begin discussion with IASCD.
Okay. Discussions, questions? There's a good discussion right down there from Mr. Tillotson. He doesn't agree with the way that the dollar amount for the 2-to-1 match. Did you see that question?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking at it now. So we'll re-examine this, but I think that there's room for, some tweaks in the math. I did the math. Mea culpa. So let us look at that, and we'll get back to you.
Mr. Chairman, Terry.
Yes, sir.
So I just took 62,500, which would be basically the base allocation, the $2,000 that's coming outside of the base, and I believe there's another $500 or $800 in outreach that comes to the districts as base, plus another 50,000 as lined out in statute, comes up to 62,000. I think it's actually 62,800 if I got my math correct. You times that by 50, it comes up to over about $3.125 million in order to be fully funded, if I'm understanding the math right. And according to the comments earlier, it would only take 1.5 million, according to Bill Lillibridge. So I do disagree with that, and I am open to being corrected.
Mr. Chair, if I could just respond to that, we're certainly willing to look at that. I think what everybody needs to hear is that the 2-to-1 match idea received a cool reception at the second meeting. So we can spend time talking about it or not, but we were not particularly encouraged that it was a path that they wanted to go down.
There's a comment.
I understand that it wasn't received well, but the math is the math is. So.
Okay.
Where do we want to go now?
Back to you, Mr. Chair.
We have another comment or two here on the math. Going forward on the math to definitely figure that out. How do you want to do that, Terry and Delvin?
Mr. Chair, what I would propose that we do is in the agenda, post a link to a corrected mathematical calculation, and we'll send that link out to all districts so that we can update that, and it's online.
Okay. I think that would be a good idea. There's some things that enter into it with the 50,000 limitation, and then many districts do not get there. If you took, that would be good to explain that, because obviously not everybody quite understands it in full detail. And sure. Kit's probably not the only one, but thank you bringing up the question, Kit. Okay, other comments or questions from ISCD board?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this is Steve. Sorry my video does not work. You know, I'm still a little technically challenged. I guess I'm going to give you, you know, you've laid out your suggestions from your board. I'm going to lay out our suggestions that we had from our subcommittee because we were tasked at our annual meeting back in November that after our subcommittee completed their work, we would meet with your board and have a discussion about our subcommittee's recommendations. I'll be brief with these recommendations, and then I have some other comments that deal with things that have been brought up in the last hour. So, and Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the email that Benjamin sent out, isn't it included in your notes for your agenda?
Yes, in fact, it's in the memo.
Okay, well, I thought it was, but I've got mine right here, so I'll just read off what kind of the subcommittee and our board suggestions are. And these are in no real order, one way or the other. These are just the bullet points that we came up with. Possibly have the Attorney General's office supply a webinar training for district supervisors and the Idaho Soil and Water Conservation District to walk through legal issues and red flags where districts can be sued. Also, it was discussed to have 2 to 3 Idaho Soil and Water Conservation Board positions be appointed directly from districts selected, basically selected from names given to ISCD. Also, then the governor would basically directly appoint 2, discuss with our board, then still probably include that if the governor didn't find the names that we submitted to the governor, if he didn't find a suitable candidate, then he could tell us, we could go back and we could resubmit more names to him. That was just a thought that we had. Another one, this is one of the important ones that we came up with. The district supervisors, IASCD, and the Soil and Water Conservation Commission look at the fundamental way that technical assistance, including but not limited to the process that allows funding for diversified technical assistance through grants, and provide a list of local expertise, vendors, and goods to cut overhead. Basically, that means we need to really take a look at how technical assistance is provided around the state of Idaho, because right now, and in Terry's comments earlier, they want T&B to be equitable, where right now technical assistance is not equitable around the state of Idaho, and we need to fix that. It's very inequitable amongst districts, and if we're going to fix T&B to be equitable, then technical assistance also needs to be equitable. Also, another comment is that the soil water, the Idaho, basically Idaho, the conservation way, Terry addressed that a little bit, reflect all parties and coordinate closely with partners in the publication. Terry touched on that. I think you're moving ahead to address those issues. Looked to me like in the latest issue that came out, I was a little more happy with the way that things were presented in your latest Conservation the Idaho Way. Another one is to have transparency through the budgetary information that districts receive from the commission, and also along with that, the way that the budgetary items are presented to partners, legislatures, and everybody else around the state. Mr. Chairman, does anybody on your board have any questions about what we have talked about with our subcommittee?
Of course, part of your request has to take probably approval by the governor, because right at the present time, of course, he appoints all board members. And as you well know, currently there are 2 board members on our commission that are also on district boards.
Yeah. I only have 1.
Huh?
I don't think you have 2 that are sitting board members. I think you have 1.
I believe Ms. Pratt is 1, And Mr. Olson is an associate member.
Yeah, but that's not a sitting board member.
Okay.
That's an associate member. That's neither here nor there, Norm, because yeah, we realize that has to take legislative action, and we're okay with that because everything we're talking about, you guys laid out that it had to be. You've got some stuff that's going to take legislative work, and so are some of the things we're taking out. We're okay with that.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Romer. I do have a question for Mr. Becker, if I may.
Go ahead.
So concerning I believe it was the last bullet point on your list, could you give some examples or describe how you would like to see the budget presented, or what would be your more detailed plan?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romer, I'm glad you asked that. I have an example sitting right here in front of me about your guys' budget, and it's not really more in depth, but it's just being transparent in how things are presented.
And so, what would be an example of a more transparent presentation?
More transparent would be, I'm referring to an email that was sent out on the 17th of February 2021. Came from the Idaho Soil and Water Conservation Commission, and it addressed the 2021 State of the State Address. Basically, it has the budget that the governor recommended. Was put in there that the governor recommended is a 1.4 increase over blah blah, and then had the transfer for $54,000 down to T&B from the personnel savings of not filling that one position. And that's all well and good, but that was not that was not the original commission budget request of the governor. That was never sent out to the districts. Several years ago, and I think it was in 2019, the commission made the commission in your budget presentation to the governor made a big splash that you were going for the full 2-to-1 match for districts. Then when the governor didn't recommend that, that was never publicized. So these are the types of things that I notice that to me is not very transparent. In my mind, this email that went out should have said your guys' submitted budget to the governor and then what he recommended. And that's the one example.
Mr. Chair, can I just address that? So you're right that our January State of the State governor's recommended budget never talks about what we asked for. Our board approves a budget request in August. That's where we talk about the full details and what's in what we need. In December, I'm invited into a meeting with the governor's office and DFM where I am given a preview of what the governor will recommend. From that time, I have to stop talking about what our requested budget is. And in fact, in January, we are told we are not able to discuss in any way, shape, or form what our budget request was unless we're specifically asked a question by the legislature. And so you're right, we are not talking about what we said we needed or what we asked for. We are in January forward, the governor's recommended budget is our requested budget. Those are just the realities of working at the state.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I completely understand that, but that's not really answering our concern. Our concern is that I know that once the governor comes out with your guys' budget, that's what you have to promote. But there was never any reference to what you actually recommended. And you recommended 0 increase for T&B for this coming fiscal year. And that was never, ever, ever presented to districts on your part. Because the first time districts ever even had a chance to look at your budget was when it was published in the legislative budget book. That's what I'm getting at. You can't, it's not very transparent, Chairman Norman. Right.
Steve, we were specifically given direction from the governor's office to submit a bare bones budget. That was his direction. So that's what we did.
Did you communicate that with other districts?
I assume, but I'm not sure. Terry, you'll have to answer that one.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. If you remember, that was part of the discussion about not only there would be a withholding this year. We started talking about that in June. We discussed that with districts, with ISCD, I believe. We've talked about it significantly. In the last few years, there has not been the latitude for an agency to ask for anything outside of what they are directed to do. The governor's office has said you will submit maintenance level budgets only, except this year when they said you will remove, was it 5% from your appropriation. And so we talked about how that was going to make district distributions 5% less in trustee and benefits, our personnel 5% less, and our operating 5% less. So to, really, I don't know how much more transparent we can be than to start talking about it in June in public meetings, in our monthly reports and so forth. I think that it's important. We don't, typically when we come to our board and districts with something, it's not just talking to be talking, it's telling you, hey, there's a curve up ahead. This is how we're going to negotiate it. So we can look at ways of, telling you again and again, but we're also being told by districts, we talk too much. They don't want to hear from us so much. So it would be helpful for us to have an agreement with districts. What really is the level of information you want? We have been really transparent. How do we dial that back and be more transparent? I don't know.
Chairman Wright?
Yes, sir.
I'm just want to check with Steve if I'm understanding. It seems to me from what I've heard Steve say that the budget that the commission approves in August in an open meeting, that budget is available because it's an open meeting type of thing. But Steve, are you saying it would be helpful for us if we distributed that budget, the budget that we are going to submit to the governor's office, distribute that to all districts once it's been approved by the commission? Would that be a step in the right direction?
No, Chairman Wright, Delvin, yeah, that would help, and that's what I'm getting at is that you presented the governor's recommended budget in an email, but you never sent out specifically what the commission had recommended in the budget when you guys approved it in September. We have to be able to compare apples to apples.
Well, Steve, technically that was sent out with our minutes back in August. And so they were online, they were published at that time. So anybody could have looked at that budget.
Yes, Norman, but you made it a total point then After the governor's recommendation came out, you made it a big splashy email that went out to all the districts. And your minutes are posted online, and then districts have to actually dig to try to find it. That is what I'm getting at. You can't, we've got to have that type of, that's not transparent.
What do you want us to do? Sit there and read it to you? I mean, seriously, Steve, transparency means it's available. It's available. We've told them, everybody about it. Everybody knows our August budget meeting. We can send it out again to a general email if you want us to do that.
Now, what we're saying is we just want, moving forward, let's not have this. We need to have it so that everybody's. I'm done talking about it. This is I digress too far.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Romer. I have one more question for Mr. Becker, if I may.
Yes.
So, Mr. Becker, just as a side note, away from the overall budget and transparency that you're talking about, are there any concerns with the financial presentations at our meetings? For example, today we'll have our financial person come forward with documentation and whatnot that we receive at each meeting. Is there anything about those that you have a question about that is on paper that you can go over, we go over, that could be changed, or that really isn't your area of concern?
Chairman Wright, Commissioner Romer. No, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, your guys' monthly meetings and the financials that you present, I don't have any concerns with those. I really don't have any concerns with the budget.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, and the way the budget is presented, I mean, I understand all of that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kathy.
Moving on, next question. Okay.
Well, Chairman Wright, I guess nobody else had any questions.
Chairman Wright,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
this is Elaine. I guess part of my question on the transparency would be, I guess, I'm trying to find a good way to put this, but we were told that there was all these budget cuts, 5%, possibly up to 14%. Everybody was getting the 5% no matter what. But then I also heard that there was a 3% cost of living increase in salaries. And that really just kind of irritated me that we're getting all these cuts, but there's a 3% cost of living increase. I mean, if you're cutting, you're cutting. I don't know if it was a rumor, if it was true, but that really bothered me that they're still getting raises handed out when a lot of people are getting cut.
Mr. Chair, I'd be
Yes,
glad.
Terry, go ahead.
I'd be glad to address that, Elaine. That's a rumor. In fact, the legislature appropriated all state employees a 2% raise this year, and the governor has withheld that. And so there's been no raises for state employees this year. The governor has recommended, and JFAC is getting ready to recommend across the board increases on, I don't know when they're doing it. They're going to start budget setting here pretty quick. There is a 2% increase included this year for state employees, but no raises were received by state employees unless it was part of an equity adjustment. The state establishes a level of what's the lowest a certain position can be paid. And I think this year we had two positions that got one position that got a minor bump up. just because they were already paid too low, but the rest got nothing.
Okay, and then I guess another part of my questions, and I wish Eric would make it to one of our meetings or talk to us, but the equipment bought, like buying new tablets or vehicles or, you know, any of that type of stuff. It would be nice to know that part of major purchases, if they are being made.
You know, one thing, Elaine, that you may or may not know, the holdback, we're been told so far that that holdback will be released probably after legislative session's over. So the holdback that we had on like your trustee and benefit dollars, we're hoping by the 1st of April, we can distribute that money. But we don't know 100% that date yet, but we feel like that's going to happen.
Mr. Chair, I think that probably the big takeaway from this conversation is that, and we can make this point to districts, if you really are interested in what our budget request contains, August is the month when all those questions are answered. The state has a formula for replacement of vehicles, and so we've not asked for a vehicle replacement for 2 years, and we probably won't for another year. Tablets were purchased, but last year, I think, instead of buying new laptops for our staff, which are eligible to be totally replaced, we bought new hard drives and replaced just the hard drives instead to save money. So August is really, if you have an interest in information like that, that's really when it's a good idea to dial into a meeting so you can hear these things.
There's also a question from Ted regarding the
Mr. Chair,
2%.
may I make a comment? This is Terry.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, before you do, Kit has a comment about his understanding is the governor sent an email out a couple of weeks ago stating that state employees are recommended to receive a retroactive 2% plus another current 2%, confirming that. I've not heard that that is meant to be retroactive. We have that money sitting in our personnel fund at this point, but I have not heard that it's to be retroactive. So if it were approved by the governor, it would, I'm imagining that we would have authorization to early implement that, which would mean from the time that we get the direction going forward, the 2% would be awarded, and it's not to all employees, it's on merit. So if you receive the highest evaluation ranking, you get the full 2%. If you have a step down from that, you probably get 1.75, and a step down from that, you get 1.5. So that is the governor's intent, but he's watching the legislature to see what happens with the proposed 2% for next year. So again, if the economy turns around, then we could find that 2% would get withheld again. But the governor did say that. He realizes that state employees subsidize the state by not receiving their 2% salary increase, and he wants to deliver on what the legislature appropriated. Beyond that, there's the discussion of the 2% for next year. Anything could happen. We don't know.
Yeah, that's part of my question about the transparency is we report every little bit to you guys of the funding, but we don't hear anything like salary increases, you know, any major purchases. I mean, I don't think we need to know that you went out and bought a pen, but it would be nice to know overall. And I have been attending almost all of your meetings. I will definitely be there in the August meeting to find out. And, you know, it would be nice to have that, to be able to take to my board, you know, print it out. I mean, I'm not going to print 60 pages out. You know, it's just a little, and that's where we get kind of overloaded, because I can't take a 60-page thing. I don't want to have to spend my money buying reams of paper and ink. I mean, it gets a little outrageous, but, you know, I try to share all the emails and hopefully they'll attend, but just a little more transparency. What is going on? Why, you know, is there increases in wages? Is there this purchase? I mean, otherwise, we're kind of running in the dark.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Olson.
Elaine, would you send me a schedule for your meetings, and I will be on the next call for your meeting, for your next board meeting?
It's the second Friday. I sent you an email asking you to get together with me and gave you information, and
I apologize. I've been busy with my house. I get sidetracked. I lose focus, and I apologize. But just send me a reminder, and I will be on your next meeting call.
Okay, sounds good. Part of our problem is that we've been shuffled to the vet center, so we haven't been able to do any Zoom calls. We can't get into the NRCS office.
Can we do? Are you doing any kind of call-ins or anything like that, or you want me to try to be in there in person?
It'd probably be better to do it in person. Otherwise, we'd have to have you on a cell phone.
Okay. We'll see what we can. We'll see what we can try to work out.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I see that Art Beal has asked a question, and I'll just read it. Where do we get buy-in from IASCD?
All right. Somebody answer that or what?
Curtis is in the comments.
Chairman Wright, I guess I'd like Art to explain I guess I'm at a loss of the question.
I am too. Thank you, Steve, for agreeing with me on that one. Art, would you like to explain, please?
Yes, this is Art Beal.
Go ahead, Art.
This is Art Beal. Thank you, Chairman Wright. We need to get a resolution from IASCD that supports whatever action goes on before IASCD actually supports it. We've had this subcommittee working, and the subcommittee's not representative of IASCD, even though we like to think we are. So somewhere we need to get the buy-in on whatever action to support whatever your action is. And I'm wondering where we get that, because your deadline's in August and our meeting's usually in November. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And I assume, Art, you're talking about our budget that we submit in August.
Yes, Chairman Wright. Whatever you submit.
Right.
We're too early for the spring meeting and too early for the fall meeting. So where do we get the total IASCD buy-in?
Mr. Chairman, if I could mention, our boards have tried to meet in June annually, and one of the items on the discussion is always, what should we be asking for districts in August? And so if we can reestablish those annual June meetings, I think that would help.
Okay. Also, in the past, we have given that budget usually at the conference in November. Of course, that didn't happen this year, so I guess that didn't happen either.
That's true.
Okay, further questions? As Mr.
Yeah.
Tillotson said, progress.
Mr. Chairman, Mike
Yes, sir.
Somerville.
Yes, Mike.
I'd like to change the subject a little. One of the items that Steve brought up may not have been understood completely. I'd like to read the statement that we have developed and talk just for a moment about technical assistance. The statement reads, district supervisors, IASCD, and Idaho Soil and Water Conservation Commission should look at the fundamental way technical assistance is distributed, including but not limited to a process that allows funding for diversified technical assistance to all districts. And then it goes on through grants and provide a list of local expertise, vendors, consultants to cut down on overhead. There's quite a bit written in there. Generally, I would say our board feels like that your technical assistance program is, first off, we have gotten into the weeds with how to document, but we don't really know what your capacity is to provide technical assistance. It seems that some areas of the state get assistance in developing grants, informed that that's a service you provide. So my suggestion and the suggestion of the IASCD board is to not just look at a fundamental way to change, but to do a full evaluation of your technical assistance with the assistance of the IASCD rather than you doing your own evaluation. Let us help with, or some outside group, maybe Curtis has some staff people that could help, and do an evaluation that thoroughly assesses what your real capacity is to provide technical assistance, and look for ways of getting outside vendors or consultants out in the hinterland to provide expertise that you're not able to provide. Having two engineers statewide is really in the extreme, and a lot of parts of the state are not receiving the same assistance that others are. And I know you base all that technical assistance on requests you receive. I'm not so sure that's the best way to do it. So we're asking for an evaluation of that process.
Okay. Mike, it's one of those scenarios right now where we've only got X amount of people and there's a lot more work for them to do with districts. How do we equitably treat all districts? And it's tough.
I agree.
And I would say that if you had a good idea of how to do that, we need to sit down and talk to you and figure out how we could do it better.
That'd be a good start to incorporate all the partners and talk about this. It may not be doable the way you're doing it. I guess is our point. It may not be doable the way you are currently doing it. So we need to re-look at it, maybe not from the inside, but from the outside looking in, and figure out a better way. Not just we need more technical people.
Just for clarification, a question, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Terry.
So I'm assuming that we would look at several scenarios, and one would be status quo, and one would be a hybrid where we do some technical assistance with staff and some grants. And then the third would just be all grants. We would provide no technical assistance. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
I think there's all kinds of options that we could look at. You're mentioning some good ones there, Terry. We just feel that for one thing, I don't think from one end of the state to the other that we really know what your capacity to deliver technical assistance is. We don't know the expertise of your field people up north, and they don't know the expertise of the field people down south. Since you don't have enough expertise, maybe we need to communicate what your capacity is, what expertise you have in sage-grouse areas, in engineering, flooding, on and on. But that's pretty well, that's a good, well-kept secret. And I don't think you intend it to be that way, but it turns out that that's the way it is. So we just need an evaluation done, and we would recommend that it be a group of outside people, not commission staff, looking at options as you mentioned.
Mr. Chairman, just a request. The technical assistance allocation process is really useful to us to understand district needs and for service. And so I would not be hesitant. If you have projects that are approved, there's going to be some work there, please submit a request for it, because right now that's our best understanding of what you need in terms of service for projects that have been approved. So please, we're about ready to invite requests for technical assistance. Don't just think of it as a lost cause, but as a way to communicate what you need. Because if you haven't done that,
Terry, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, but we're just giving suggestions. We don't need your feedback and your answers necessarily. We're just trying to explain where we're coming from as a partner. And
I appreciate that, Mr. Somerville. Thank you for the clarification.
Chairman Knight?
Yes,
this is Elaine again.
Yes.
Part of what came about with this whole discussion of needing more outside technical assistance is we were hoping to have a project in Bergdorf. For our technical assistance to get to Bergdorf was to see what the project would entail and have eyes on is a 6 to 7 hour trip one way. How do we justify doing something like that when they can't even get halfway there? They've got to turn around and go back. So we're stuck. We don't have anybody there. If we had an outside source for technical assistance, say in McCall, so they could drive up and see it. It would be a benefit to all the districts. You know, our district is Idaho County, and it's huge. We have a hard time getting Eileen or Bill to places like Bergdorf to be able to have that assistance. We need something we can use outside of that. And if we knew of a vendor or somebody that was more local in that area, we could get those projects done. We've had several of them that were way out there, and we can't get technical assistance to them.
Right. So are you asking us to try and develop a list of people that you might be able to hire to provide that outside assistance?
Correct.
All right. Something we can look into. I don't know where we're going to come up with the names, but if we put the information out there, there'll probably be people that will come to it.
Well, we'd appreciate it. I mean, I know we would, and I'm sure the people that want the projects done would greatly appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you.
Next comment or question?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Along with Elaine's comments, and I don't think it's really that they want you to provide them with a list of different technical assistance providers. Really what the request, and it's our board, and Mike said this, we just need to look at the system of how technical assistance is allocated throughout the state of Idaho to make it a more efficient system of getting that technical assistance on the ground. Right now, from where I sit, the system is inequitable. It is also not just a matter of, you can't just always fix something by adding more employees or throwing more money at it. We need to cut, I mean, as Mike said, there has to be, and Terry, you had some good comments about whether it's grants or whether the technical assistance money, if there's something really specialized that the money could be sent to a district so that they could hire that work done. I don't know, but that is definitely something moving forward that we need to look at.
Mr. Chairman, if I could echo Steve's and Elaine's concerns. I share those, and I tell you, Steve, I've been pushing inside for changes, and I've made comments several times. It goes back to even the state engineers, and I appreciate Bill, and I've made comments before about how far away we are as far as trying to get Bill up here to check out projects that we're trying to do up in Boundary. So I share your concerns, and yes, I'm in agreement with maybe there's a different way to look at something and go forward from there.
Okay. Looks like a task needs to be on our plate considering how we might be able to do this better and trying to incorporate some outside information. Okay. Moving on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Wendy Pratt.
Yes, Wendy.
I think it's important that we talk about the process of appointing commissioners, and I'd like to hear from the IASCD board where that comes from, why they think the existing program is ineffective.
Okay.
Oh, Chairman Wright, I guess that would be me, huh?
Sounds like it, Steve.
Okay. Commissioner Pratt, Chairman Wright, I think where this discussion came from, and it came from the subcommittee. Probably one of the biggest contentions, and I'm going to speak for the subcommittee, and Elaine is on and Art is on, and I want them to also be able to chime in. We need to have districts and district supervisors need to be in the process of appointing the commissioners. As it is in statute now, we provide names to the governor's office, and the governor picks from those names. But that doesn't always happen because he has the discretion to do to appoint whoever he would like to the commission. That statute is going to need to be changed if we proceed with this. I think the underlying discussion that the subcommittee had over this is that there's times where the governor does not pick from names that are submitted by ISCD, and we ended up with commissioners on the Idaho Soil and Water Conservation Commission commissioners who, for a lack of a better word, are not well educated and do not have an understanding of the inner workings of soil and water conservation districts at all. That starts, I mean, that's where the rift starts. Another thing that is concerning is every other commission in the state of Idaho that I've ever been involved with, kind of the same type of process happens, but the governor basically just has to pick from the list that is provided. So that's another impetus that I think the subcommittee was getting at. And I'll just leave it at that. And if Elaine or Art have anything to bring on, or if Commissioner Pratt, if you have any other questions for me, I'm sure to answer them.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So just maybe to add to what Steve has said there and the subcommittee is putting out there, one of the things that comes into to Kit's vision is supervisors are elected officials, and in this world of districts, you know, it's definitely a tangled web, but because there's perceived fiduciary responsibilities by the commission over the districts, by allowing the districts to be the entity that submits the names that are basically going to be governing over them as elected officials. That's kind of blunt, but that's how a lot of the districts look at this, is they are elected officials and they are being governed by a state agency. So this is buy-in to the districts to be able to submit their names, much like Steve said, and make sure that we're getting people that understand the inner workings of the whole web, so that it works best for everybody involved.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say something here in response to Kit and Steve. I agree with you to a point. You know, I was a supervisor and had I would say a 30,000 foot understanding of exactly what the commission does, and it's not until I got into the position I'm in now as I fully understand. And there's still probably some gray area that I need to buff up on, but I also want to go back to the point of Mike's comments about having outside people coming in and wondering if there's a better way to do things. And sometimes you run into the situation where you're going to have people that are know the inner workings and everything else, and I get the whole point of being a public official with being an elected supervisor. But I think it's good to have people that don't necessarily have all of the knowledge coming into this, so that you can keep the ideas are, well, why do you do it this way? Why don't we look at it this way? So we don't get tangled up into that. I share everybody's frustrations with the appointments of commissioners. I'm on another commission for oilseeds, and we've been trying to get a commissioner appointed for the last almost year now. So I share everybody's frustrations with the recent process, or lack thereof, I should say, in the last year and a half or 2 years with the appointment of commissioners. So I just want to caution the thinking that we got to have only what the district's point, and and it's going to be up to the governor at the end of the day as to whether or not he's going to relinquish that power that he has to appoint whoever he deems appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick rundown. I don't know what the makeup of the commission was before I came, but I've kind of jotted down a list here of since I came, and if I've forgotten, somebody remind me. But if you remember when I got here, Roger Stutzman, who's a former ISCD president, Glenn Gear, who was also a supervisor, Leon Slister, who was a supervisor for many, many years before he passed away recently. And then there's also the governor wants expertise from ag lenders. And so we had, I believe, before I got here, Morgan Evans, maybe. We now have Jerry Trebish, who is an ag lender. And then we were looking at ways to strengthen the connection with local funders, county commissions, and city councils. And so we've had Norman, you've been a city council member, you've been a county commissioner. You've also
I worked with districts for 35 years.
Yeah, for the FSA with districts. Dave Bradford, county commissioner. Jerry, I mentioned. Eric has experience, and Wendy is now a supervisor. And so I think the thing that is frustrating for all of us is that we waited for 1.5 years and hoped that there would be a certain commissioner appointed from Division 6, and we were all disappointed. There have been some comments about us having undue influence and promoting Wendy Pratt for that. Actually, we had no input on that other than just to suggest that Wendy and Kathy Weaver and Jane Sandstrom, if they were interested, that they apply. Wendy is the only one that did, and she was appointed within, I don't know, several months of when she applied, Wendy, I think. So we've kind of forgotten the district-centric focus we've had and still continue to have, but it's there.
So I'd like to weigh in on that too. This is Wendy again. And I don't know how you guys will view this, but obviously I think it was my appointment that brought this to a head, and so I've been thinking a lot about it. And I think when we have issues with trust, we tend to want to make things more rigid, draw lines around things so that we can shore that up and it doesn't happen. Again, whatever we decided is not trustworthy about the other party. But when we do that, we don't have that flexibility that builds resiliency, really. And man, I would sure just like to work on trust and not put another layer of difficulty in how we get commissioners appointed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe moving on. Do we have other questions or comments?
Yeah, Chairman Wright, I got one more. I got another comment.
Yes, Mr. Becker.
Commissioner Pratt, and I want to be honest with you, you might think that it's fallen on you that this has come up because of your appointment, and that is the furthest thing from the discussion that the subcommittee and the ISCD board has had. This issue goes back a long ways. It used to be, I mean, in statute that basically there had to be an equal amount there had to be, if the governor was a Republican, there was 3 Republicans and there was 2 Democrats on the commission board members. That got changed a long time ago. Then it was in statute that it was, everybody had to be, basically the governor needed to pick, and there needed to be geographical representation of all the commissioners. That went by the wayside after our last governor, because he chose to basically ignore that. And so it's not you. We need to understand that this is just a recommendation from our subcommittee, and we need to have these discussions. And moving forward, we need to see if there is a better system out there, then let's maybe look at it. That's all it is. And Commissioner Pratt, I don't want you to think that this just came up because of your appointment.
Well, I don't. I appreciate that, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. And Commissioner Wright, that's all I got on that one.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And really, we're talking about something that has to be changed, has to be agreed to the governor. So we're well past that issue, and that's fine. I get a hand wave here from somebody.
This is Art Beal.
Art.
Mr. Chairman, I don't care who you choose, just they got some kind of a background in agriculture and the environment. We don't need somebody in there making decisions on the land that don't fit. We need somebody in there that kind of understands what's going on out in the world, where we get our bread and butter from, and how we get them there. I'm not really concerned with that. I'll shut up for now.
Okay, thank you, Art. Okay, we have more discussion on okay. Anybody else want to throw something out?
Mr. Chair, if before this conversation ends, if we could get a proposal from ISCD for the process that they envision in looking at the TA, that would be helpful.
And looking at the loud?
At the technical assistance, that big picture, how could we do it differently? What would be the process and participants and all of that timeline?
Okay, I think that's going to take some sitting down with maybe Mike and trying to come up with some ideas that we can go forward with it. I'm not sure.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Terry and what you're saying. I think that's a good way to get started. Not ISCD kind of developing something in a vacuum, but maybe a group of us getting together and kind of get the boxing gloves off and get down to some fundamental work.
Okay, so maybe moving forward a bit, maybe, Mike and maybe Delwyn could sit down and maybe come up with some ideas, the path forward, and incorporate other people into that conversation. Then come back to us with their ideas.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a request. So the timeline that we laid out for going through to identify statutory changes, if this is kind of this isn't part of that, but it's related. Delwyn has, his dance card is full until May. And then I think he'll have a little bit of a lull before we have to go out in August and start kind of vetting whatever we come up with. So if a May deadline would work well, but I also heard that Mike say, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, that he didn't necessarily see this as staff-led. So if you could maybe give us some more details about that.
Yeah, that I might not have said that correctly. We need, I think we need to invite NRCS, a representative there, members of the ISCD board. And you know, we need Delwyn to fully explain somewhat, but I think we need to get some out of the box thinking and propose something that might help. But I think, you know, this is something we could say, well, we're all busy, and so we aren't going to do anything, just kick the can down the road. So, you know, I think if we really believe in this, we need to set aside some time.
Chairman, right?
Yes, Darwin.
Yeah, I like this, the way we're heading with this, and I'm grateful it's been brought up, and it's something, what I see initially is that a really critical thing, and perhaps Mike and I together, me listening to Mike basically, kind of come up with a framework, what it is that, what framework is going to be required as far as which partners to pull in and that kind of thing. I would like, if initially we could just, between the commission and the ISCD, agree on how the process for forming that group of outside partners that is going to evaluate this, if we could have an initial meeting to kind of establish that before we brought everybody in and I got buried with just a whole lot of different random ideas. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yes, very good.
Okay. And Chairman Wright, if I could, I'd also suggest that we need the same kind of collaborative direction finding for this effort to look at that, if there's going to be a legislative change required for the way the governor appoints commissioners, that we need to know from you guys and from the rest of the districts on if that's really something you want to pursue as a legislative change, if that's something that ISCD needs to be the spear, the point of the spear on that in the legislature and the governor's office, or if that's something that the commission needs to be the point of the spear on, and figure out how we're going to establish, one, that is the will of the district, and then number two, how to push it forward so that we can see the changes that, or attempt to make the changes that are desired in the legislature.
Okay, I'd like to further a question there or a comment back to Delwyn and Mike. From what Delwyn you're telling me is maybe you and Mike will sit down an hour or so and visit about how those changes, how that might work, and then you can come back to us and we'll chart a course forward. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm thinking. Mike and I won't be discussing the changes. We'll be discussing how we will ferret out the suggestions for change.
I like that idea. And then the second one, I believe that if the ISCD is interested in changing the way commissioners are appointed, I believe that's got to come from them. I don't believe that I would feel very comfortable of telling the governor how to change the commissioners' process. I think that's going to come from outside.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. That needs to come from the districts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're putting us in an impossible point of view there. So, Kit, that is right. If you guys don't like the way it's done, then I think that's got to be presented up from you guys. Come up with an idea and a process, negotiate with the governor, and get it done. But
you don't want to cut your own throat, do you?
Yeah. Okay, so that's going ahead, I think, in those directions. So, next comment. If we're getting about wrapped up, if other people have more ideas and comments or questions, that'd be wonderful. But we need to kind of move ahead with our meeting also. Was there any wrap-up questions or comments? Okay. Is Curtis Elke still on the line?
Mr. Chairman, he's gone off until he'll rejoin at 11. Well,
Noon.
You got?
No, he said noon.
Noon, yeah.
Okay.
Chairman Wright?
Yes, sir.
I'm Daniel here. Going forward, could we possibly, you talked earlier about talking with the governors and representatives and senators. Is there a way that we can get back together and at least have one of us there at that meetings with when you have that too?
Point taken, Tom. I don't, as far as I know personally, there's no other meeting scheduled with senators representative on this point. Is that correct, Terry?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. The meetings were to brief them about what was coming up. We did that. And then now if they want to talk to us, they contact us.
Now, if they did contact us and wanted a meeting, then we could reach out to an ISCD board member and tell them about it.
Sure.
I would appreciate that.
Okay. Believe me, Tom, what we ran into was not what I thought was going to come out of the conversation, but Eric's comment sure did change a little bit. And I thought it went through positive forward. I was hoping the best. Okay. Then we don't have any party reports that I'm aware of. And right at the present time, we finished up item 4 at the present. I will say this, if other people have questions or comments, please get back with us and let us know, and we'll try to answer them. So with that, it appears to me we're moving ahead on action items in our minutes. Well, before we go to this, thank you everybody that was on, that made comments, and those of you that were silent. I hope that you got something out of it, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Okay.
Thanks, Chairman Wright.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Did someone have a question?
I think he was just thanking you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, our meeting of January 14th minutes. Everybody get an opportunity to review those. If so, I would accept a motion to approve them.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Eric.
I'll second the motion, Commissioner Romer.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Further question?
None here.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Financial reports, Ms. Menzies.
Do you want me to
Yeah,
turn the
please.
camera?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a moment, Mitch. There she is.
Okay. So first, just briefly touching on the financial reports and fiscal matters. We held our budget request hearing at JFAC on January 22nd. The governor's recommendation left the commission's budget request unchanged, other than, of course, the removal of the TRS-2 position. The JFAC budget setting date is scheduled for February 22nd. The commissioner honorariums, we're currently sitting at about 41% spent of the honorarium allocation for the FY21 year. Does anybody have any questions on the memo?
I think it might be helpful in light of the conversation on the budget to explain what the commissioner honorariums are. And if, Elaine, particularly if you have any questions about what we're talking about, this is a really good time. Yeah, the honorariums, you want me to? Yeah. So honorariums are prescribed by statute, and basically commissioners and are paid a rate of $50 per day for their service to the state. And so what we do is we give the commissioners a budget of how many days we think they'll meet at the beginning of the year, and Rachel tracks it and reports to the commissioners where they're standing on how many meetings they've attended, etc. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Okay. If there are no questions on that, I'll go ahead and move to the financial reports. We have the financial reports and fund summaries for both December and January. So we'll start with the detailed financial report for December 31st, 2020.
It's up on the screen for them.
Okay, starting with the top left, general fund expenditures for personnel. We're currently sitting at, as of the end of December, at approximately 46% of the personnel funds expended. Under operating expenditures for general fund, the next section over, we're sitting in December at approximately 53% spent. As compared to prior years, that spending is lower due to the fact that field staff is just not traveling as much due to COVID. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Moving over to trustee and benefits expenditures, that's unchanged from the last commission meeting. And similarly, the cash balances for received to date is unchanged from the last meeting as well. Any questions there? Okay, moving on to the federal grants, our federal fund 0348. We still have an outstanding balance. That the receipt of that, the application is in process. It's in the hands of the feds at the moment to process that through. So that is in process, but is still an outstanding balance. So that's unchanged from last meeting. Any questions there? The dedicated fund 0450, the professional services, all those fields are unchanged from the last meeting. Our CRDP loan administration Under personnel expenditures is approximately 44% spent as of the end of December. Operating expenditures are sitting at approximately 28% of what was expected. Any questions? Okay. Moving over to the cash received to date, less the expenses. We are continuing to receive payments in a timely fashion, which are exceeding the amounts that we're paying out at this point. So that shows the current snapshot of that as of December. And of course, the balance sheet, you'll see that there were some payouts made since the last commission meeting as far as our loans. Any questions there for RCRDP? Okay, the last one for our December report is the DEQ revolving loan. The operating expenditures are unchanged from our last meeting. We did, if you go over to the last section there, you'll see we actually made a $75,000 payment towards that loan, which has reduced the balance that we owe on that currently. Any questions on the December financial report? Okay, we'll move over to the December financial summary. I have to apologize, we did have to issue a corrected one on this one because for some reason I didn't have the personnel funds under general fund updated as it should have been. So there was a corrected one issued on that, but everything else was the same. So starting on the top left under general fund, personnel funds, our expenditures, as you saw in the financial report, are sitting about $540,000 with a remaining amount. And this was prior to completion of the payroll projection. So the next month's is going to be a little different, but the $539,000 expended under general fund personnel as of December. And moving over to the RCRDP loan administration personnel, again, about $78,000 expended on RCRDP personnel. Any questions there? Okay, operating funds, general fund, about $113,000 expended so far. Professional services remains unchanged from last commission meeting. The RCRDP loan administration expenditures, approximately $43,000 expended in operating. And again, under the revolving loan, operating funds unchanged from last commission meeting. And of course, going down, the trustee benefit also remains unchanged from the last meeting. Any questions on the December financials at all? All right, we'll move on to January. Starting on the top left, personnel expenditures for general fund as of the end of January is sitting now at about 52% expended as budgeted. Operating expenditures is sitting now at approximately 60%. There was a jump there because we did go ahead and pay the second half of our Boise office lease payment in January. And again, the expenditures, of course, are still a little low as compared to prior years. Trustee and benefits expenditures, unchanged from last meeting, although as Commissioner Wright mentioned earlier, the timing of making the remaining trustee and benefits payments depends on when we receive notification from DFM that the holdbacks can go ahead and be released. So maybe as late as April or hopefully approximately mid-March, we'll see additional expenditures there. The cash received to date in the top right there remains unchanged still. Any questions on the general fund section of this report? Okay. Just briefly touch on the grant funds and professional services. Just like December, nothing has changed there from our last commission meeting. RCRDP Loan administration personnel expenditures at approximately 52%. Operating expenditures at approximately 36%. And again, they also share a portion of the second half of the loop payment for the Boise office. Our cash section received to date has further reduced the loan cash balances thus far, and we have not, as of yet, dispersed any more loan funds. We will be dispersing some more loan funds here shortly, so you'll see that on the next commission meeting. Any questions for our CRDP? Okay. And the revolving loan DEQ, that is unchanged from the December financial report. Any questions on the January financial report? Okay, now going to the January financial summary, here's where there is a little bit of a change. Due to some turnover at the agency, we've created a more detailed payroll projection, which will more accurately show what we're expected to expend here for the rest of the fiscal year. So the expenditures projected is now different from the December report. So currently we've expended about $619,000, and there is a higher remaining balance than there was expected previously. However, due to not being able to hire the TRS2 position has caused quite a bit of stress and overload on another position here. And so we're looking into possibly hiring a temp to help with some of the backlog on work that's been created by not having the TRS2 position and taking some of the load off of our admin assistant, Crystal. That amount also, did you?
Oh, no, go ahead. Okay, you're getting to it.
That amount also, if we do receive guidance to distribute the 2% CEC, that balance will also be reduced by that. Do you have anything else you want to say on that, too?
No, that's all.
Okay. Are there any questions there for personnel for general fund?
I guess I would also say, as part of the projections, if we are able to early implement either the 2% from this year, or if the legislature decides to award 2% for next year, this $68,765 would be significantly reduced in the meantime. So we have some positions out there that we just refilled a water quality resource conservationist. We are getting ready to put out the announcement for the engineer on the other side of the state, and the temporary to help with the workload in Boise. So those things will come out of that buffer. In addition, I want to just note that your board directed us to hold back 14% of our appropriations in general fund in case the governor does some sort of rescission. And so the high balances in operating and personnel both reflect that 14% as well.
All right. Are we done?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, personnel funds spent for our CRDP loan administration per the new payroll projection as well. Since we did have turnover of one position in our CRDP, the remaining balance has increased slightly there as well. And our expenditures are currently sitting at $91,000 through the end of January for personnel. Now going to operating funds, under general fund, our expenditures are currently sitting at $126,000. Professional services, again, unchanged. Our CRDP loan administration operating funds, since we've been very, very conservative so far this fiscal year, we had made high projections towards the beginning of the year about potentially having to use up more CRDP funds for operating expenditures to cover some of those deficiencies, but we have now adjusted that downward due to the more favorable economic outlook and the fact that we've been very conservative in our spending. So we've now adjusted those figures. So those are going to be a little different than what you saw in prior months. The revolving loan operating funds unchanged. And going down the list, the last one, trustee and benefits, again, unchanged. Any questions on any of the financials? Okay, now the fun part's over, Norm.
Okay. With that, I'd like to accept the motion to approve December 31st, 2020's budget financial report.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Romer. I move to approve December 31, 2020 financial report as submitted.
Thank you.
Make that second.
The second by Wendy. Thank you. Further question? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think Terry had something to say.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to note that we did meet with you yesterday, as our usual practice, and you reviewed in detail all the financials for the benefit of the other board members.
Okay. Right in the middle of my motion, thank you.
I know.
All opposed, same sign, motion carried. Moving on to January 31st financial report.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romer, I move to approve the financial report for January 31, 2020 as presented.
That should be coming 2021.
Oh, excuse me, I'm reading off the,
I know you are.
yeah. Yeah, sure is. Okay, I stand corrected. January 31st, 2021 as presented.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Further question? Hearing none. All in favor of approving January 31st, 2021 budget financial report, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. The same sign. Okay, approved. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this one will be really quick. As you know, I presented our rulemaking for the year to both Senate Ag and House Ag. Both committees recommended do pass to their respective houses. And so we're waiting to watch that go through the system. We're not yet sure that the legislature intends to extend existing rules this year. Again, this will be our 3rd year in that cycle. And so as a precautionary measure, your board has been asked by DFM to adopt the motion that I gave you, precisely that exact wording, to extend, let me step back, or Chantel will step me back. We, out of an abundance of caution, submitted our omnibus rulemaking as a fee rule because the loan program requires the recovery, or not the recovery, but the payment of costs for loans by the borrower, title, etc. And so we were unsure whether or not that would be considered a fee rule, so we went through the fee rulemaking process. The Administrative Rules Office and our Deputy Attorney General had a conversation. It appears that technically our omnibus rulemaking does not satisfy the tripwire to be a fee rule. And so we are adopting this as this time a temporary non-fee rule. Has a slightly different process working through the legislature for next year. So the request today is that your board adopts a temporary rule, notice of omnibus rulemaking, and we have to submit that by March 4th.
Okay. With that being said, would somebody like to make the motion and read it, please, into the record?
I can make the motion. You want me to read this whole, starting at pursuant then, huh?
It appears that way, Wendy. And you got a nice,
Commissioner-
clear voice.
Commissioner Pratt, Chairman Wright, I just want to point out this action item was actually sent over from DFM specifically as the one to use. So they do want us to read the full 4 paragraphs into the record as the action item.
Okay. Pursuant to section 67-5226 Idaho Code, the governor has found that temporary adoption of this rule is appropriate to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Idaho and confer a benefit on its citizens. These rules implement the duly enacted laws of the state of Idaho, provide citizens with the detailed rules and standards for complying with those laws, and assist in the orderly execution and enforcement of those laws. The expiration of these rules without due consideration and processes would undermine the public's health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Idaho and deprive them of the benefit intended by these rules. Therefore, we are adopting this temporary rule to be effective upon signed die of the 2021 session of the Idaho legislature. The approval is conditional and will only become effective if the rules are not otherwise approved or rejected by the legislature and or not extended pursuant to the Idaho Administrative Procedure Act, including sections 67-5291 and 67-5292 Idaho Code.
Thank you, Wendy. Second.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Motion made on the floor, seconded. Further question? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, moving on to item number 9, Administrator's Report.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was just checking to see if I saw Curtis Elke, and he's not rejoined us. So I've listed there for you my activities since your last meeting. I will also note that we've received a bill for our annual dues to the National Association of State Conservation Agencies. I've listed what the organization notes as their benefits, and we have included the $3,000 for the dues in our budget. It's entirely up to this board. According to what you want to do. That is the action element of this report. I do also want to note that under email communications disclosure, after your last commission meeting, I sent out an email that went to all commissioners giving, I can't see it now, thanks, giving an update on the status of training that was provided to the districts on our website. And some of the commissioners replied all to the email giving comments. Because all of the commissioners were on the email change, we recognize that this was an open meeting violation. No action was taken as a result of this conversation or the district training issue. But in order to cure the violation, we're disclosing the email conversation, and we included it as an attachment to the agenda for this meeting. I don't intend to necessarily go through that. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. The final thing is a tentative commission meeting schedule. You can see we have March 18th, April 15th, May 20th, and June 10th. These meetings are an integral part of the schedule to deliver any potential changes to legislation. And so it's probably not likely that these dates will change unless you direct us to change them. With that, Mr. Chairman, I am recommending that your board consider approving payment of NASCA 2021 dues.
Thank you. Would anybody like to make that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romer, I move to approve payment of NASCA 2021 dues. Do I need to state the amount, Terry?
You can, that's 3,000 if you want.
Okay, yeah, in the amount of $3,000. End of motion.
Okay, thank you. Second by,
Wendy will give the second.
thank you, Lindy. I was waiting to see between you and Eric who's gonna jump. Okay, with that, further questions on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that puts us down to item number 10. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. It appears at this time we need to go into executive session.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romer, I move to enter executive session pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74-206, parentheses 1, parentheses D, for the purpose of discussing a loan application, and Section 74-206, parentheses 1, parentheses B, for employee review.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Can I interrupt real quick?
Jerry. Jerry make the second? Okay. Further question on the motion? Roll call vote.
Chairman Norman,
Yes.
was there a question before I call vote?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Was?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Elaine had a question or a comment.
Okay. Go ahead, Elaine.
I just wanted to be able to hear what Curtis said. Is there any way to join again? Because I don't want to be, I can't be involved in the executive session, but.
Right. He wasn't going to join us till 11.
Right.
Chairman Wright, I'm
yes,
sorry,
sir.
until he was joining us at noon Mountain Time, which is in 30 minutes.
Okay. We should be done with this and come out. So we can come out of it and hopefully he'll be able to join us, or we can text him to have him join us at that time. So check back, I guess, at 11 and we'll see what we can do, okay?
Yeah, I just need to resume again.
Yes, Elaine, this is Crystal with the commission. I will open the regular open session, the one that we're in currently. I will reopen that one once executive session has closed. We'll need to reopen and take any actions if necessary and close out the meeting anyway. Hopefully that'll be around the same time that Curtis is able to join us to give his report.
Okay, thank you. I just haven't done this part of it before, so.
Okay,
I wasn't
thank you for
aware.
the question up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to roll call vote.
Okay, roll call vote. Chairman Norman Wright,
Yes.
Commissioner Kathy Romer,
Yes.
Commissioner Jerry Trebish,
Yes.
Commissioner Eric Olson,
Yes.
Commissioner Wendy Pratt.
Yes.
And before we leave, Crystal, you sent us a link, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
So Crystal, this is Commissioner Romer. Can you send the link to my Gmail?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll drop off and see you soon.
Good deal.